I'm Zach. I'm the founder of Warp. Excited to demo a couple new features that I actually built. The two features that I'm going to talk about are configurable input position and reverse mode, which is a pretty bonkers way of using your terminal. To quickly say what these features are, in case you're only going to watch the first part of this, they are basically the ability to choose where your input box goes in the terminal and how it behaves. So in Warp, the normal mode for the terminal, we have this input box on the bottom here. This is true even if you have a blank terminal or if you hit Control L and clear it. And as you enter commands, the commands kind of go upwards in reverse chronological order. You can sort of navigate them and select them and use this as your block list. It's pretty much as soon as we launched this, we got feedback that people wanted something else. And so the other two ways of doing this that we've now launched, one of them is called Start Input at the top of pane. And so in this mode, Warp works much more like a sort of standard terminal in terms of how the input functions. So as you enter commands, they go down, the input moves downwards, and then once the screen is full, the input is at the bottom. There is a pretty significant difference in Warp still in that the final state of this, even if the input starts at top, you still get this like nice pinned behavior at the bottom of the input. The second feature that we added is called reverse mode. It's also like called pin input at the top. And in this sort of way of using the terminal, you have this like kind of crazy experience where the actual ordering of your commands in the terminal is reversed. So if I were to run a few commands here, you'll notice that the most recent command is actually at the top and less recent commands are lower down, and you can still sort of navigate and use these same interactions. It's just totally reversed. So why did we do this? This was actually my project. Why did I build this? So let me show you a little bit of the user feedback that we got. So issue number 22 ever filed in Warp, we've had about 3,000 issues filed now, was this amazing sort of GitHub issue filed by Donald Guy. And he points out that like if you always have the input at the bottom, this can be a pretty suboptimal experience for people from an ergonomic standpoint. So it makes them like kind of always look at the bottom of the screen. I think this is more pronounced depending on like how big someone's screen is or how they like to work, where their eyes are aligned. But this we've gotten a lot of complaints. This is our sort of number 6 overall user issue. I think it's caused a lot of people to say they can't use Warp, and so it was important for us to try to address this. What's cool is if you look at this issue, this is an amazing GitHub issue. The actual solution proposed by the issue author here are pretty close to what we ended up building. Like is a suggestion of reversing the input, and there is like this author goes into really a lot of the different options of what we could do to address it that we actually ended up doing. And so hopefully this satisfies or fixes some of these problems for our users. That was the main motivation. A couple things I wanted to talk about that made this like interesting to build or hard to build. So in the crazy mode here where everything is reversed, like the thing that made this hard was like we basically needed a sort of like from a technical perspective, we needed an abstraction between our view code and our model code that like basically tried to hide as much of this directionality as possible. It's not totally possible to hide it all in the code because we do have this kind of crazy thing where the blocks are now ordered from most recent at the top to least recent at the bottom, but within a single block you still have the most recent output is at the bottom and the least recent is at the top. And so this was just like, I think this actually makes the mode a little bit more confusing, but if you wanted to like select across blocks here, for instance, this selection is actually selecting like effectively the least recent part of this block and then this most recent part of this block, which is, if you think about, it's not a continuous selection of text. So that's like a sort of example of one of the hard problems. A second hard problem was to do with long running commands. So if I were to, like, let's say I'm running something like a server and it is constantly outputting lines. If you're in the sort of the normal mode here, the behavior that you want with respect to this in a terminal is that if you're scrolled all the way to the bottom, you sort of are pinned to the bottom and always seeing the most recent output. And if you scroll up, you want the output to not jump around. You want to be able to look at something. You don't want anything moving while you're looking at it. And then if you want to go back into the mode where you're following the most recent output, you just scroll all the way to the bottom. This does not work if you have the input at the top. So if I go back to the top here, pin input to top, you'll notice that if I scroll all the way to the bottom, I want to be able to look at the commands that I ran a long time ago, and I actually don't. That doesn't get me back to lock the scrolling. And if I scroll all the way to the top, I might want to look at output from this block that came before what's currently being scrolled. And so the way that we fix this is by adding this lock scrolling at the bottom of block button. So if you click this, you end up locked here. You can also do it through the keyboard by doing Command-Shift down, and so that will get you locked. But this was like, I just didn't realize that we needed this until we actually built it, and so this was like one of the tricky things. For the other mode, for the start input at top, it's not the challenges weren't, well, they were hard in a different way. They were hard because the way that what happens when we do this Control L is now you have an input that actually scrolls. And so we wanted to maintain this idea of, like, when you get to the bottom here, you still can always see your input. And so the actual area that you're scrolling sort of changes as you scroll around here. And to do this in a way where it's still fast and all of the terminal stuff is still viewported was actually pretty challenging and interesting. And I'll put a little bit more about it in a blog post about how our underlying data structures work. Anyhow, I would love to hear user feedback on these two modes. I'm particularly curious if anyone likes the reverse mode, which is, there is, I think, one person on our team who really likes it. So please give us feedback. Hopefully this addresses the issue that people have. There may be bugs in this. It was a pretty complicated project to build. But thank you for watching, and thank you for trying more.